You're a funny boy, aren't you? Yes, you are. Funny boy. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Lord Mayor, it looks like you're trying to speak, but you're on mute still.
Yeah, you're muted, Kevin. I thought that I was always unmuted. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, councillors. And welcome to anybody on the YouTube channel watching this taking place. This is a meeting of Norwich City Council. However, it's a meeting that cannot make binding decisions. That will take place tomorrow. So in this meeting, members will discuss items on the agenda and they will vote on each of them. Then these votes will be ratified as at an in-person quorum meeting of councillors tomorrow afternoon. And the reason we're doing this is that a decision has been made to hold the council meetings in this way on public health grounds. It's in response to the COVID rates in Norwich. The situation may change, but at the moment, for good public health reasons, that's what we're doing. Can I also remind members that when you are voting on items, can I ask you to use the virtual hand button, and then, as also neatly demonstrated by our officer, then raise your hand clearly in front of the screen. I have apologies this evening from councillors Button, Driver, Manning and Youssef. Are there any other apologies? No, thank you very much. Okay, on to Lord Mayor's announcements. I could say so much, but I do want to mention two events in particular. The Sheriff and I, a couple of weeks ago, went to the Mile Cross Community Fair, which was a marvellous event, a marvellous community-driven event. There were many stalls there, many interested and interesting organisations involved in the life of Mile Cross. And it was very useful indeed. So I want to publicly thank everybody involved in that. Also, on a more reflective note, I had the privilege of addressing a week ago families across Norfolk who had gathered at the forum. These families had lost a member during the past year, but that member of the family had generously registered as an organ donor, and their organs were used to save many lives. It was a great privilege to meet these people, to talk to them, and then to walk down with them to the cathedral where there was a subsequent service. It was wonderful to do so. And as I say, these families were from across the county and they had come to Norwich for this purpose. So again, I would say thank you to those families. And I'll use this opportunity to remind everybody that if you're not registered as an organ donor and you can register as an organ donor, please do so. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any other declarations of interest to make on any items on this agenda? I've been told Councillor Boeglein has already registered an interest.
That's correct, on item 7A.
On item 7A. Thank you, Councillor Boeglein. Anybody else wish to register an interest? No. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 3 of the agenda, questions from the public. We've received one question from the public, and it's from Mr. Hugo Malik. I think we all know Hugo, former councillor Malik, and always a doughty defender of the market, of Norwich market. So, Councillor Malik, would you please ask your question?
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, just a quick thank you to the market managers, Laura Bateman and Phil Malloy, cabinet members Davis and Packer, and to the Mancroft councillors Bogeline and Osborne for their help and support over the past 18 difficult months, particularly during the January lockdown, when many market traders were struggling to access the government grant money for small businesses. So my question, Norwich market is a unique asset for the city, and it is in the council's and the city's interest to ensure that it can prosper. Recently, a number of rival markets have been started that pose a threat to trade for Norwich market. When Norwich market traders have raised concerns about this, the council have referred to the need for a rival markets policy. Yet this policy has not yet been written and seems to have been passed from department to department. Can the cabinet member confirm that a rival markets policy will be written and that Norwich market traders and the local community will be consulted and provide a timescale for the policy?
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Councillor Packer, would you like to respond to the question, please?
Thank you for the question, Hugo. Just to say that the council's rival markets policy is detailed on our website. The policy is being reviewed, and we anticipate that the consultation with stakeholders, which will include traders, will begin in the first half of 2022. So we will look to get that revised policy completed as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. Mr. Malik, Hugo, you're allowed one supplementary question, and you've got a whole 60 seconds in which to ask it. Do you have a supplementary question?
No, it was nice for you to mistakenly call me councillor there, Lord Mayor, for a second. No, I don't have a supplementary, and thanks for your answer, Councillor Packer.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is consideration of petitions, and we've received two petitions. The first petition is being presented by Mr. Steve Keyworth. Mr. Keyworth, would you... Oh, sorry. I was a bit anticipatory. Is it... Mr. Keyworth, are you now there? Yes. Mr. Keyworth, would you please present your petition?
Hi, hello. I represent the residents of NR47, which is 5 connected roads. I have a petition from 88% of the non-HMO houses in this area. It's what is happening here is that family homes. Can you? Sorry, am I being heard?
Yeah, Mr. Keyworth, can you please present the petition?
Oh, do I have to say I am presenting the petition?
Not everyone will have seen it, and you're speaking for a group of signatories.
Yes,
so will you please read your petition?
Okay, sure. Okay, we, the undersigned residents of NR47, being Salter Avenue, Jasmine Close, Primula Drive, Penryn Close, and Morello Close, believe that the concentration of HMO student housing has reached a level where it is impacting negatively on long-term residents, meeting at least 6 of the 8 negative impacts listed by the planning department when considering intervention. Fair limits to HMO developments need to be set swiftly to protect the integrity of the neighbourhood and prevent families and long-term residents from being driven away. In addition, there needs to be better, faster, and more connected reporting processes to handle any antisocial behaviour issues that arise from the existing mix of residences. The council has a legal responsibility to protect the character of a neighbourhood, and we ask, 1, will the council update and republish the evidence prepared in 2014 and published in 2016 in regard to the levels of HMOs across the city? in particular in the university ward and the specific roads represented by the signatories of this petition. And, that was 1A. 1B, on the basis of the evidence, introduce an Article 4 direction in part or all of the city to remove the permitted development right for the change of use from an industrial dwelling, C3, to an HMO, C4, and consider and implement any associated policy review / update to introduce the necessary development management policies to assess submitted applications arising from the introduction of the Article 4 direction. 2, will the council consider the implementation of either voluntary accreditation or additional or selective licensing for smaller HMOs to enable better control over the standards of the housing in this sector? And 3, residents have reported specific antisocial behaviour using the appropriate avenues and written to the council, as well as the university and the police. Can the council explain why it has been so slow to take any significant action in this area?
Mr. Keyworth, just before I ask Councillor Stannard to reply, can I just clarify? I think it was a slip of your tongue. You talked about change of use from an industrial dwelling. Your petition says residential dwelling, and I assume
yes, that's what I meant. Residential. I was.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. How does it?
Yeah.
I've not done this before. Do I?
No, that's
talk
fine.
About it or?
No, that's it. You've presented a petition that's been signed by, I think, 88 people. And we'll
88% of the 88%. Households.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is N as a matter of interest?
NR47.
No, sorry, N. How many? It's 88% of how many?
Of the we're having a problem with HMOs. This is 88% of the non-HMO households.
Yes, sorry, I thought.
So, yeah.
It's, as an academic, we like to know percentage and number as well. But okay, we'll stick with your percentage. Councillor Stannard, would you like to reply, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for your question, Mr. Keyworth. So I'll answer each of the questions that you've put in turn. So first of all, the answer to question 1A. The issue of HMOs is something that was discussed by councillors a few years ago at both Sustainable Development Panel, otherwise known as SDP, and Cabinet. And its meeting in June 2016, Sustainable Development Panel resolved to approve the introduction of an Article 4 direction based on a minimum threshold of 30% of houses being HMO accommodation, subject to Cabinet approval. This was considered by Cabinet in September 2016, which did not agree to take forward an Article 4 direction at that time, but instead resolved to ask the Sustainable Development Panel to reconsider the approach to HMOs, taking into particular account the extent of take-up of the Voluntary Accreditation scheme for HMO properties, analysis of the impact of welfare reform on housing options for different sections of the community, and implications for demand for HMOs, published plans for the growth of academic institutions and implications for student numbers and purpose-built student accommodation, plus any available information on the number and quality of HMOs in the city. Since then, there has been significant growth in development of purpose-built student accommodation, otherwise known as PBSA, reflecting increases in student numbers. To respond to this, the Council in 2019 adopted a PBSA best practice advice note to provide guidance for developers of this form of student accommodation to ensure it meets housing needs, relevant policy requirements, and is well managed in order to inform planning decision making. The advice note doesn't specifically cover HMOs, but acknowledges the role they play in providing student accommodation to meet the needs of the higher education institutions, and notes that the provision of significant levels of PBSA is likely to take some pressure off the private rented sector in the city. The note also proposes closer cooperation between the council and the universities and student unions in order to encourage development of well-managed PBSA and to reduce potential for conflict arising between students and their neighbours. Whilst much of the PBSA is being built within the city centre, it has and will continue to take away pressure from residential streets closer to UEA. Much of this PBSA is being occupied by postgraduate students who would otherwise need accommodation. And whilst in the past students typically lived in a hall of residence during their first year and then occupied houses near the university in later years of their courses, this trend is changing, with some students choosing to live in PBSA for all or several years of their courses. The PBSA schemes developed to date are well occupied, and without these developments, these students would have required alternative accommodation. It would be best to establish the extent of HMOs across the whole city as a full update to the evidence produced in 2016, rather than specifically focusing on a single area. And this evidence base will prove useful for the development of both planning policy and consideration of licensing options, to be discussed later in this response. Now the answer to question 1B. If the evidence produced provided sufficient justification for the introduction of an Article 4 direction, then this could be pursued by the Council. It should be noted, however, that recent changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, have made the introduction and use of Article 4 directions much more difficult, requiring them to be limited to situations where an Article 4 direction is necessary to protect local amenity or the well-being of the area, and in all cases to be based on robust evidence and apply to the smallest geographical area possible. That's in the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 53. It cannot be guaranteed at this time that the evidence will support the introduction of an Article 4 direction. If it does, the petitioner should note that the introduction of an Article 4 direction is determined by central government. Question 2. The Council introduced a scheme of voluntary accreditation for landlords of HMOs in 2016. This scheme was largely unsuccessful due to poor uptake from the trade and has since been discontinued. The Council will not reconsider the introduction of a voluntary accreditation scheme. However, the Council does have powers to introduce additional or selective licensing. Additional licensing.
Councillor Stannard, could you begin to wrap up, please?
Oh, I didn't realise I had a time limit on this.
Sorry, 5 minutes.
I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm just reading the response that was prepared by officers, and I've got a little way to go. So, so the gentleman won't have all his questions answered in that case.
I'm just going to confer with the monitoring officer on this. Can the response go on? Okay, consulting with the professionals. If you finish your answer to this part, Councillor Stannard, and what we will do is we will publish the full answer on the website along with the petition. So sorry to interrupt you like that, but if you continue and finish the answer to that question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Council, this is question 2. The Council introduced a scheme of voluntary accreditation for landlords of HMOs in 2016. This scheme was largely unsuccessful due to poor uptake from the trade and has since been discontinued. The Council will not reconsider the introduction of a voluntary accreditation scheme. However, the Council does have powers to introduce additional or selective licensing. Additional licensing can be introduced where the local authority believes that a significant proportion of HMOs are poorly managed and giving rise to problems for residents or the general public. The use of additional licensing has to be consistent with the local authority's housing strategy and should be coordinated with the authority's approach on homelessness, empty properties, and antisocial behaviour. The local authority must consult those who are likely to be affected. This includes people who live, work, or operate businesses in adjoining local authority areas where they will be affected. Decisions to designate an area as subject to additional licensing must be approved by the Secretary of State unless they fall under general approval. A general approval was issued in 2010 to enable local authorities to make such designations without government's approval, provided there is a minimum 10-week consultation period. The 10-week period does not commence until the local authority produces a draft proposal identifying what is to be designated and its consequences. Additional licensing can come into force no earlier than 3 months after the designation has been approved, or if it falls under the general approval. It lasts for as long as set out in the designation, up to a maximum of 5 years, and its operation must be reviewed from time to time. The local authority can revoke the designation at any time and must publish notice of this decision. Further, a local authority can introduce selective licensing, which applies to more than HMOs. In order for a local authority to introduce a selective licensing scheme, it is a requirement that the area has a high proportion of property in the private rented sector let under assured tenancies, including assured short-hold tenancies and licenses. The private rented sector does not include properties let by private registered providers of social housing. In addition, it is also a requirement that one of the following conditions must be met. The local authority's area is an area of low housing demand, has a significant and persistent problem of antisocial behaviour, has a significant number of privately rented properties in a poor condition, is experiencing an influx of migration. Migration refers to movement within the country or from overseas, has high levels of deprivation and suffers from a high level of crime. At this time, it is considered prudent to update the evidence base on HMOs to establish the type of accommodation across the city in order to inform the decision about the right route for any additional controls to be introduced. And I apologise, I do have an answer to question 3, but I apologise, Mr. Stewart. No. I'm not going to be able to provide you with that.
So you will, and thank you so much, Councillor Stannard, for carrying on reading. I know it's very difficult being interrupted. Mr. Keyworth, thank you very much for your petition, for you and your co-signatories. You've had a nearly full answer, and there's a tiny bit more to come. Sure. And they will be published. We will place an electronic copy of your petition on the council website along with the full reply. And once again, thank you for taking the time to come in and addressing the council and questioning Councillor Stannard. So in a moment
is it possible to have 30 seconds? Because I don't think I had 5 minutes to talk earlier.
Well, it's not a case of talking. Perhaps you presented a petition. And in as much as one can talk, one can present the petition. There are other procedures by which you may ask a question with notice. But this is a petition, and that's the procedure for a petition. There is no, which I suspect what you're coming to is an opportunity to ask a supplementary. There is no. No,
I just have two very small points.
Well, yes, I understand that, and yes. So you will get your full reply, and it will be on the website. You're welcome to watch the rest of the meeting on the YouTube channel, should you wish. And I think also, if you have any other questions or comments or whatever, you still have the right as a citizen to write to Councillor Stannard, and you will get a written reply to those points. So thank you once again. Thank you. Okay, we have now a second petition presented by Mr. Stephen Robinson. Mr. Robinson, is Mr. Robinson joining? Mr. Robinson, are you with us? Have you found him?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Robinson. Welcome to a meeting of Norwich City Council. Now, you have a petition which you have written, and presumably you've got a number of signatories to that petition. And your opportunity now is to present that petition to the council. So would you please read your petition to the council?
Absolutely. I'll just check that you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, I'm here to present a petition on behalf of the Friends of Britannia Road, essentially asking for a public space protection order to address antisocial behaviour and dangerous driving on Britannia Road, the length of Britannia Road, but obviously focusing on the Britannia Road car park. Now, this behaviour has been rife on Britannia Road since at least the 90s.
Mr. Robinson, what I'd be grateful if you present your petition to the council. In other words, please read it out.
I have sent in the petition. I haven't got a copy with me now.
Oh.
In fact, if you'll
you hang on
excuse me for
second,
a minute, I will get one.
Well, just hang on. I'll have a word with our monitoring officer. Right. Okay. Mr. Robinson, I could read it for you if you wish. And
yes.
it goes like this. We, the residents of Britannia Road, are in favour of a court injunction, and you put in brackets, public space protection order, to address the antisocial behaviour of boy racers on Britannia Road and in the Britannia Road car park. So that's your petition. And I'd now invite the portfolio holder, Councillor Jones, to respond to your petition. Councillor Jones, where are you? There you are. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for attending full council this evening and for the excellent work you've achieved working with fellow residents to highlight this significant and recurrent problem. Norwich City Council understands well how antisocial behaviour can blight the lives of people in their local communities, with those affected often feeling powerless to act. I am particularly aware of the significant disturbance the problem these boy racers cause to the community on Britannia Road. The noise, fear of damage to vehicles, rubbish left, and sometimes intimidation faced by residents to have sought to repeatedly challenge this. It's utterly unacceptable that you should face this problem. The City Council has a key role to play in helping make local areas safe places to live, visit and work, and tackling antisocial behaviour continues to be a high priority for the City Council and our partners in the district. City Council is aware of the ongoing allegations of antisocial behaviour related to vehicle use on Britannia Road area. Officers of the Early Intervention Community Safety Team are currently yet liaising with other agencies, including Norfolk Constabulary, in order to assess the nature of the issues and find appropriate and effective solutions. I know that the Crome Ward councillors have been working with local residents and the police, including joining a police patrol and discussing the issue of local SNAP meetings and securing SAM2 speed cameras from Norfolk County Council to deter further activity and collect vital intelligence for the police. The Anti-Social Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014 introduced several new tools and powers for use by councils and their partners to address antisocial behaviour in their local areas. These tools were brought in as part of the government commitment to put victims at the centre of approaches to tackling ASB, focusing on the impact behaviour can have on both communities and individuals, particularly on the most vulnerable. One of those tools within the 2014 Act was the use of public safety protection orders. Orders can be introduced in specific public areas where the local authority is satisfied on reasonable grounds that certain conditions be met. The first test is the nature of the antisocial behaviour requiring that activity that have taken place have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality, or is likely that activities will take place that they will have a detrimental effect. The effect or likely effect of these activities is or is likely to be persistent or continuing in nature, is or is likely to be unreasonable, and justifies the restrictions being imposed. I am reminded from the legislation that PSPAs must be used proportionately and in the right circumstances. PSPAs will not be suitable or effective in all circumstances. It's important to consider carefully the right approach for identifying and addressing the problem behaviours. Some issues may be adequately addressed using other tools. For instance, awareness raising campaigns, the impact of certain activities on others, improving community engagement, offering support to those exhibiting certain behaviours may be enough to address the ASB identified. Overall, in the case of Britannia Road, given the evidence provided, it is clear to me and your ward councillors that these preemptive measures have been largely tried repeatedly with little long-term success. Norwich City Council, in consultation with relevant stakeholders, will consider all the possible interventions required to tackle this issue, but the consideration and introduction of a PSPO seems at present to me like a valuable and positive opportunity and one which could be pursued. In summary, if one can release the work with officers and the police and their report, I will be in a final position to decide upon this, but would like to also ensure that the community is consulted too. Lastly, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time, effort and energy and commitment shown in pursuing this problem and seeking a positive and hopefully longer term solution for the residents living locally. I will contact you personally again in due course on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And Mr. Robinson, thank you so much for coming here and presenting your petition. We have an electronic copy of your petition and that will be posted on the council website. So thank you again for coming to the meeting this evening. Officers will now remove you from the meeting, but you are welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting, if you should so wish, on the council's YouTube channel. Thank you. Item 4 of this evening's agenda, which is the minutes of the 2 meetings of the council, the one on the 20th and the one on the 21st. I call upon Councillor Waters to move the minutes as correct. Councillor Waters. Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Bogerline to second the minutes.
Formally seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Bogerline. We will now move to a vote, and starting as usual in that backward way, all those against. Okay. All those abstaining. And all those in favour. Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Now on item 5 of the meeting agenda, which is questions to Cabinet. There are 17 questions from members of the council to Cabinet members, of which notice is being given in accordance with the provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution. A copy of the questions will be available on the council website, and members who've asked questions are permitted to a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. So you've already got, or you will see, questions and answers. So I will now go through the questioners and ask them if they have a supplementary question. So question 1 from Councillor Huntley. Councillor Huntley, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Question 2 from Councillor Giles. Councillor Giles, do you have a supplementary question? I guess the thumbs up is a 0. Thank you. Question 3.
Lord Mayor, the thumbs up was yes.
Right. Then please give me your supplementary, or rather give the portfolio holder the supplementary question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Will the Cabinet member join me in condemning Boris Johnson and this Conservative government for kicking the abolition of Section 21 evictions into the long grass? And thank you for the answer, Kate.
Giles, absolutely. One of the most basic needs in life is to have secure and safe accommodation, whether that's for homeowners, for social housing tenants or private rental tenants, everybody. So absolutely, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. So question 3, Councillor Fulton McAllister to Councillor Davis. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor.
Please go ahead.
Given that during the debate, one of the constant refrains of the Tory MPs was tell us how we would pay for the universal credit additional £20 payment, how that will be kept. Does the Cabinet member have any advice for our newly positioned Tory MP in Norwich North, Chloe Smith, in her role as DWP Minister?
Thank you, Matthew. I think my answer will be along the lines of what your answer would be if I was asking you this question. My answer is that the Tories should be taxing wealth, not low-paid workers. We've got workers who are in low-paid jobs. They're going to be hit with a universal credit cut of £84 a month, rising energy costs, rising food prices, and then in April they're going to be hit with greater national insurance contributions. And these are the same workers who filled up vital social care roles during the pandemic, and they're essentially paying to give Tories tax breaks to second homeowners and people with unearned income. So if everyone in full-time employment earned a real living wage, the government wouldn't need to top up poverty wages with universal credit.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Question 4 from Councillor Peake. Councillor Peake, do you have a supplementary question?
I thank Paul Kendrick for his reply. I have no supplementary, but I'd just like to add something to that.
But can you turn it into a question or not add it?
You might say a question, but it might be a question. At the end. Right. I'd like to
ask the question, then go ahead.
Right. But add to the Tory government will drag their heels over this until it will be too late for the elections in May for their benefit. So as a local authority, will we push this issue?
Thank you for your supplementary question, Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
yes.
good. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the internet connection because I'm at home tonight, which I should council. Yes, obviously we will campaign strongly on this piece of, I think, very retrograde legislation. It is aimed to reduce the voting rights of ordinary people.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. So question 5 from Councillor Everett. Councillor Everett, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary question. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 6 from Councillor Maxwell. Do you have a supplementary question to Councillor Packer?
Yes, I do, please, Lord
Please
Mayor.
go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Packer, for the details around the tennis courts development. It sounds very exciting, but could you please provide me some details of how they will be accessible for the city's residents? And would you also pass on my thanks to all that worked hard to make this happen? Thank you.
Councillor Packer, please reply.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Maxwell. Let me begin by also highlighting the wonderful doubles victory at the US Open involving Norfolk's own Alfie Hewitt. As a son whose father used a wheelchair, the restrictions he faced in accessing certain facilities were not right. Making sports facilities accessible for our residents is something which all councils should strive for and rightly have a duty to pursue under legislation. The provision of these all-weather courts enable our residents to access these facilities for longer periods of the year, for longer periods of the day than the grass courts at Hyde Park previously did. Crucially for me, the courts will enable our residents who use wheelchairs year-round access. The courts will be accessible for residents both young and old, and there are 4 schools within easy reach of the park whose students will be able to utilise them. The courts will be affordable for residents. Norwich Park's tennis membership is currently just £35 or 67 pence per week for a whole household for an entire year. The alternative option of grass courts maintained by a community group involved members being charged £60 each, something which I know Green Party councillors were in favour of. A household of 4 paying £35 against an alternative of £240. It's clear to me which option is a better value for money. Crucially, Councillor Maxwell, they will form part of the network of tennis courts across the city. Taking a citywide approach to sports provision will increase accessibility to those facilities, both in terms of residents physically being able to use them and the usage of residents across the city supporting the network as a whole through the reserves generated to pay for maintenance to all courts. I would also like to highlight to our residents that there has been a lot of misinformation about the expansion of these all-weather courts, particularly in relation to those at Hyam Park. I wouldn't want such information to potentially impact on residents utilising these facilities. So for the record, the courts will take up approximately 35% of the space where the grass courts had, not the at least 70%, which I've heard and read that some groups have claimed. The money to fund this is coming from the Council's Capital Fund, Community Infrastructure Levy, and Section 106 funds. This money could not be used to pay for general fund services the Council provides or pay for staff. It couldn't contribute towards our council tax reduction policy or contribute towards our Pathways Homelessness project. I feel that those who seem to have deliberately misled the public, either through ignorance or to seek to pursue a political agenda, should look closely at their behaviour in spreading such false information. Our approach returns access to tennis facilities to Hyam Park in an affordable and financially sustainable way to make them accessible long into the future without requiring annual funding from the council, which remains one of the worst cut in the country by this vicious Tory government. And finally, this project is just one of a number of capital investments in our parks and open spaces across the city. So once complete, this facility will equip our community and city with premier, sustainable, modern and accessible facilities which will benefit all, something we could and should be proud of.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. Question 7 from Councillor Sands to Sue Sands to Councillor Hampton. Councillor Sands, Sue Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
No, sir. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Question 8, Councillor Champion to Councillor Oliver. Councillor Champion, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for your answer, Councillor Oliver. I'm glad that you recognise that there is a requirement for joined up approach going forward, given the scale of the problem of tagging, especially of our historic buildings and around the city centre. It has been estimated that cleaning up tagging costs the UK £1 billion a year. As you acknowledged, there have already been additional 20 days of graffiti cleaning this summer. So this is clearly a growing problem. Given that tagging is costing residents, businesses and organisations, as well as the taxpayers, such a large sum of money, can you commit to putting the necessary resources into fast tracking the development and implementation of this strategy within 6 months?
Councillor Oliver, would you like to reply?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, my light bulb has just gone out. So I made some notes and I'm finding it really hard to see. But thank you, Councillor Champion. I'm really glad to hear that you acknowledge the extra 20 days worth of graffiti cleaning this summer that we were able to utilise. And yes, we do need a joined up approach and prevention, cleaning and enforcement and additional resources. And we're going to continue to benchmark ourselves against other district councils. We're working closer with NCSL now to enhance the service even further, and the opportunity for insourcing has given us this strength. So yes, we'll continue to deliver the strategy required for longer term improvement and change. With regard to timescales, watch this space. I will need to consult with officers in order to give such a definitive response, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Question 9 from Councillor Galvin to Councillor Packer. Councillor Galvin, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor, I do.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Packer, for your answer. The community centre were given Silver Carbon Charter status specifically for being leaders in the community in terms of cutting carbon. And that's because they're a sort of small foundation institution in the community, and they paid for the panels from reserves gained from the room hire that they worked really hard to get. So they're not a wealthy charity. So as a much larger foundation organisation, would you work with the cabinet member for climate change to look at how the council could support other centres from its much bigger reserves to actually work together to lead the whole city in the same way this centre has? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Packer, would you like to reply?
Sure. Thank you for your follow-up question, Councillor Galvin. I'm not sure I'm aware of where the bigger reserves are. If you're referring to the bigger reserves of the City Council, I'm sure you'll be aware of the updates we've had from our finance department about where things sit and the financial difficulties we're going to have to face and manage. Having said that, I will obviously work with my cabinet colleagues to do what we can to support our community centres wherever possible.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. Question 10 is from Councillor Youssef, who sent her apologies, so there will be no supplementary question. Question 11 from Councillor Osborne to Councillor Stannard. Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary question to your question?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor.
Then off you go.
Councillor Stannard, thank you for your response. I noticed that you say this is not the appropriate time to consider the council's stance on the airport's master plan, and the master plan being the one that proposes tripling the airport capacity. This council has acknowledged the climate emergency, and we are in the run-up to runaway climate change, as well as in the run-up to the COP26 crucial climate talks. So please could you tell me when is the appropriate time for the council to stand up and oppose airport expansion?
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor Stannard, would you please reply?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Osborne, for the question and the supplementary question. I think the thrust of what I'm saying is that certainly post-COVID, the landscape has changed significantly, and certainly airport usage has significantly reduced. And we're not entirely clear what the future holds. What we do know, though, is that we've managed previously to persuade the airport to include in its master plan measures to reduce its carbon footprint. And we need to encourage them in doing that and more, and to support them in that work, whilst recognising at the same time the importance of the airport to the local economy in creating employment and facilitating connections and communications with the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Now, that's at the moment really important that we do that, because clearly from the impact of COVID on the airport as a business has been significant, and we wouldn't want to destabilise it at the moment by making any decisions around our stance on the master plan. That said, there may well be a time in the future when we would wish to do that. So we need to take a balanced approach and recognise the importance of the airport and its operations economically and socially. And I guess I would ask the question really back to the Greens, and it's a rhetorical question. I mean, you're asking about our support for the master plan, but I remember some years ago when Heathrow Airport won an award, an environmental award for its operations. The Green Party being aghast that an airport could win such an award. I wonder whether you would actually, your real agenda is you'd like to see the airport shut.
Thank you for your answer, Councillor Stannard. Question 12. Councillor Haynes, would you like to make a supplementary question?
I would. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And
please go ahead.
Thanks for the response as well. But from what I've heard, the nuance is just an extra line on the end of the unclear existing email that doesn't really add much useful information. So given this, and given that the fact both I and some of my residents have reported things that are health and safety concerns, in my opinion, Providence Place and Bolton Street, does the council think the revised answer is fully answering residents' concerns about exactly when their, in some cases, quite serious problems are going to be solved?
Thank you for your supplementary question. Councillor Harris, would you like to reply?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Haynes. This is quite difficult in so much that I would always want a resident to be able to get an answer which is relevant and takes their issues very seriously. I'm more than happy to discuss this with the Executive Director of Development and City Services, because the actual message on these responses doesn't actually come within my portfolio. So I didn't know why the question was actually being directed to myself, which is fine, because I'm more than happy to talk to my fellow cabinet members. But if you could give me an example, because you've just mentioned, I think, Providence Place. So if you could, if you were able to provide me with that example, that would be very useful for us to talk that through. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll pop you an email, Gail.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Question 13 from Councillor Bogerline to Councillor Oliver. Councillor Bogerline, do you have a supplementary question?
I do indeed, yes, thank you. So I'm
Please
afraid
go
to
on.
report that since I've sent this question in, yet another communal household waste bin on Langley Ward has been red tagged and has not been collected for 3 weeks. So bin bags are spilling over. There are overspilling bin bags from another 2 communal bins on Langley Walk. So in all honesty, I have to say residents live right next to a tip at the moment. So whatever review of communications there was between the council and Biffa isn't working for Langley Walk at all. So could I please ask you that you personally see that Langley Walk gets a wholesome solution, a holistic solution to this problem, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bogerline. Councillor Oliver, would you please reply?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bogerline. Yes, and you're aware that we have improved our communications, but clearly something from your report is not going as it should in this case. And certainly I'd be happy to then go and have a walk down to Langley Place if you'd like to join me, or I can pop down because, yes, committed to sorting it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Question 14 is from Councillor Price. Councillor Price, do you have a supplementary question for Councillor Oliver?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Oliver, for your answer. I'd like to say that, you know, to see that the council will increase in its engagement with businesses to advise and support them should be welcomed. What I would say is that the question really asked you about what long-term solutions will be developed to address the problem of waste left out overnight. And effectively, there is no solution being offered here whatsoever. So it seems that we are going to be complicit in leaving out bags of waste, which obviously is only contributing to the rat problem, which we saw reported in the paper only 6 days ago. So my question to you is that effectively, that is not a solution. And I've seen that many commercial operators will offer food waste collection, as well as a range of size of bins for waste.
Can you begin to turn that into a question, please, Councillor?
Yes, I'm just setting it.
Sorry, can you make a supplementary question to your main question?
I will, if not interrupted. So the question.
Well, then please get on.
So the question is, will the cabinet member sit down with myself, ward councillors and director of service to talk about the possible options that are available to commercial businesses so that we can actively look at putting and implementing some procedures in place to improve the problem? So will you sit down and meet with us?
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Oliver, would you please reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Price. I mean, I can certainly speak for myself and say, yes, that I'd be happy to. I mean, I'm just referring you back to the response to the questions, that we can take enforcement against commercial waste, but against commercial waste breaches using Section 34 of the Environmental Protection Act if businesses are failing in their duty of care and waste is escaping their control. However, we do prefer to take an educational approach rather than enforcement, recognising the strain that also businesses have been under during the pandemic. But certainly where things aren't working, I absolutely would be happy to sit down and discuss the issues with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Question 15 from Councillor Carlow to Councillor Packer. Councillor Carlow, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. And
then please go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. Yes. About 5 years ago, the council undertook a small trial of alternatives to herbicides in Earlham Cemetery, but nothing came of the trial. So I arranged a demonstration of foam stream, a non-toxic alternative at Eaton Park. But the City Council found every argument against foam stream, which is used by a number of local authorities. So my question is, what confidence can we have in next year's trials, please? Thank you.
Councillor Packer, would you please reply?
Thank you, Councillor Carlow, for your follow-up question. I think I've got full confidence as we're working with the PAN network. So I have full confidence, as per my answer, that we will be able to get some results, all being well. What I would add, though, going back to your original question, it's really the reference that you made to not having heard anything from me on a specific matter. And I think just for full clarity, as I feel that text could be viewed as being critical of me, I just clarify that your latest email arrived to me on September the 2nd. That same week, my widowed mother was diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time. She has her first operation tomorrow. And having had cancer, I cannot stress enough the enormous impact it has on that person, their family and friends. So since the first week in September, I've been doing all I can to help and support my mum. This has meant that I've not had the same amount of time available for council duties that I would normally have. I've been working my way through emails, but have not yet caught up with them all. And I would have been happy to have shared all of this and the answer to your question with you had you approached me before now. Thank you.
Thank you,
I wish your mum well. I did contact the City Council about 3 or 4 months ago.
Thank you. Very difficult circumstances, but thank you very much, Councillor Packer, and I'm sure we'll get on to that. Right, I've just been pointed out by the monitoring officer that we're now 30 minutes into the question. So question 16 from Councillor Lubbock will be the last one. Councillor Lubbock, do you have a supplementary question from Councillor, Councillor Oliver?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Oliver, for your reply. The decision to withdraw the clinical waste service was apparently taken on the 23rd of February. And so a delay of 6 months in notifying the school certainly deserves an investigation to explain why it happened and to ensure better procedures are in place to prevent it happening again. However, the head of the Clare School also asks, and I appreciate if you can't give an answer, you will do so at a later date in writing. What consideration was made prior to the decision of the specific needs and vulnerabilities of the pupils of the Clare School? Thank you.
Councillor Oliver, would you please reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lubbock. Yes, I certainly will be looking into that, and just want to reiterate our apologies that our miscommunications have caused inconvenience and upset. And as you can see from my response, we're committed to working with the school going forward for an outcome that's acceptable to everybody. I've emailed the head teacher this afternoon, so we'll be in contact with her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. So as I've said, the questions have taken more than 30 minutes, and so there will be no more questions. This is in line with the Council's constitution. We'll now move to
Thank you very much. Can you, Lord Mayor, I'm some problems with the internet, but can you confirm you can hear me?
I can hear you, and I can
Thank
see
you
lots
very
of nods.
Good, thank you. Well, this is working for at the moment. Anyway, this report details the results of the Council's Treasury management activities for the financial year 2021, compares this activity to the Treasury management strategy as approved by the full Council on the 25th of February 2020. Table 1 shows the capital expenditure totaled 31.8 million. Of this, 22.7 has been financed immediately through the application of capital or revenue resources, such as capital receipts or capital grants. The remaining 9 million, which included lending to the Council's wholly owned company, has increased the Council's overall borrowing need. Table 2 shows the closing capital financing requirement of 329.8 million. This is the cumulative total of the 2021 unfinanced capital expenditure of 9 million and prior years unfinanced capital spend. Table 3 shows the actual growth borrowing as at the 31st of March, which totaled 219.9 million. The Council has continued to maintain an under-borrowed position in 2021. This means the Council borrowing need has not been fully funded with loan debt, as cash supporting the Council's reserves, balances and cash flow has been used as a temporary measure. This strategy is prudent as an investment returns are low, although additional external borrowing has been budgeted for the financial year 21-22. The prudential indicators in relation to the capital finance requirement, the additional limit and the operational borrowing boundaries have been complied with in this financial year. At the year's end, the Council held 74.8 million in cash equivalents and short-term investments, as shown in Table 8. The investment activity during the year conformed to the approved strategy, and the Council has no liquidity difficulties. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of that speech. Perhaps I should quit while I'm ahead technically with the Wi-Fi.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick, and as always, succinct. I call upon Councillor Stuteley to second this item. Councillor Stuteley. Councillor Stuteley.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Hello.
I hope you can hear me. And thank you, Councillor Hendrick, for introducing the report. I formally second this and thank officers for their hard work, which continues to put the Council in good shape in the hardest of political times and economic times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stuteley. Councillor Price, would you please like to respond on behalf of the Green Party?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kendrick, for regurgitating the report for all of us. I'll try and keep it quick, and it's hard to not sound like I'm repeating, but here we go. So the report sets out the Treasury management performance for 2021 cycle, and is for the Council to note. Yeah, the regulatory environment places responsibility on the members of the Council to review and scrutinise Treasury management policy and activities. This report details the outturn position for the Treasury activities. Its purpose is to highlight compliance with the Council's policies. I note that the actual capital spending was under budget for the year by £66 million. General fund capital expenditure was a substantial £33 million under budget, with the Council only spending £5.8 million of the overall £39 million that it had effectively earmarked for it. HRA capital expenditure was £32 million under budget, spending only 18.5 of the 51 million that again it had forecast to use. Now, obviously, COVID will have heavily impacted the Council's ability to deliver on these set budgets, but I must question the severity of these underspends. And I hope that Councillor Kendrick, if his internet holds up, will be able to explain in more detail some of the significant factors when he sums up. Norwich Regeneration Limited made a loan repayment of £3 million at the close of the cycle. It must be welcomed that since the right governance and management structure has been introduced, that the company is now operating on a much better footing. Although it is in the interests of NRL to repay some of its loan back, which helped to provide some comfort on the council's liability via the £15 million loan it has provided the company, it of course means less income for the council in interest charges. It would be good to now see the council be more adventurous with NRL and get on with building much needed 3 and 4 bedroom affordable housing in the city centre, located on the large number of brownfield sites that are available, some that are in the council's ownership. The council maintained an under-borrowed position in 2021. This means that the capital borrowing need has not been fully funded with loan debt, as cash supporting the council's reserves, balances and cash flow has been used as a temporary measure. The council paid 8 million in interest costs on external loans, and this compares with the budget of 10.27 that it had put aside. So, so the reduction against this budget was due to the continued use of internal rather than external borrowing as a result of holding sufficient cash balances. So this is a prudent saving and should be welcomed and congratulate the officers for such. Members here are only too aware of the financial challenges that lay ahead for this council in the medium term, and tough decisions will need to be taken in the MTFS to have balanced budgets in the years to come. There are no more airports to sell off. Some revenue streams are likely to be permanently impacted. I'm sure we are all keen to see what the local government settlement will be. I concur that this report does ensure that the council have been kept informed of Treasury activity. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Price. I call upon Councillor Wright to speak on behalf of the Lib Dems.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. One of the issues with this particular factual report is by the time it gets to me and the Cabinet member has spoken and we've had a detailed analysis by the Chair of Audit, short of repeating exactly the same thing, there is nothing I can add that will be of any substance. So I'll quit while I'm ahead as well. And other than thanking the officers for the hard work and work that I think will get harder as we move into future years, we note this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any other councillors who indicate would like to speak on this? I can see no councillor, so I call upon Councillor Kendrick to respond.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do wish to respond to the comments made by Councillor Price as to the reasons for the underspend on the capital programme. Well, I should think people may remember that there has been an unprecedented crisis in regard to COVID over the last more than a year now, and this of course has affected every organisation, and I think you'll see similar underspends in other local authorities, indeed other public bodies, indeed many private companies as well, who simply haven't been able to do as much during that period as they would normally have done so or would have liked to have done so. Obviously, I hope that the crisis is beginning to resolve itself. We shall see on that score, and we shall perhaps get back to a situation where we are more able to meet our planned forecasts for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. So we will now move to the vote, and in that reverse order, and remembering both virtually and physically to vote. So all those against the motion to note the report. All those against? Nobody against. All those who wish to abstain from this item. There are no abstentions. So all those who are in favour of this item, please indicate. Okay, thank you very much. You may put your hands down and turn your little Bart Simpson hands off, and that's unanimous. We now move to item 7, which are the motions, starting with item 7A. Now, there has been an amendment to motion 7A. It was received from Councillor Osborne. Once again, my enthusiasm overtook the protocol. Councillor Bergline, you need an opportunity to remove yourself or be removed temporarily. Okay, as I was. An amendment to the motion 7A has been received from Councillor Osborne, and Councillor Hampton has indicated she's willing to accept the amendment. So if no other members object, the amendment will become part of the substantive motion. Okay, so I call upon Councillor Hampton to move 7A as amended. Councillor Hampton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In just over a month's time, COP26, the United Nations 26th Climate Change Summit, is set to take place in Glasgow. World leaders will come together to review their progress towards meeting the Paris Agreement and present their plans to cut emissions and limit warming to 1.5 degrees. This is our best last chance, and probably our last chance full stop, to keep this target alive and to avert catastrophic climate destruction. It needs to be a COP of action, not just words. The eyes of the world will be on the UK, and this should provide an opportunity for our government to step up, show global leadership and raise ambition. We're bringing this motion now to make sure Norwich adds its voice to those calling on the government to make the most of this crucial moment and do more faster. We also, once again, want to amplify our ask to be given the money and power we require to deliver as much as we can here locally. COP26 comes at an especially pertinent time as the UK and the world hopefully start to emerge from COVID-19 and move into a programme of recovery. This pandemic posed an economic crisis and not just a health one. It's laid bare many of the deep inequalities our society faces. It has also seen mass behaviour change, with many of us having to adapt to a new normal. Now, the government should take this opportunity to build towards a sustainable, fairer future, keeping our emissions targets and international obligations in mind during that process. And that means creating green jobs and investing in reskilling, transforming our energy supply and transport systems, investing in eco-friendly, socially conscious housing, and, as we'll come on to later tonight, decarbonising our food and farming systems. But unfortunately, so far the government has shown little sign of acting with the speed and scale required. They've frozen fuel duty / electric car incentives, scrapped the Green Homes grant, and delayed the phasing out of gas boilers, just for starters. Their net zero strategy and also hydrogen and heating and building strategies have all had their publication delayed. There is this big disconnect between the government's emissions reduction targets and the policies in place to deliver them. And of course, at the same time as all this, they've slashed local government funding and reduced the ability of councils to go as far as we need and would like to go. Action to tackle the climate crisis has to happen across the council and its services, and as we've always maintained, tackling this climate crisis is inextricably linked to dealing with those social and economic crises our residents are facing every day. This is the ethos underpinning much of the environmental work and many of the achievements of this council to date. We were the first council in the country to run a collective reverse auction for domestic solar panels and first to run a renewable only collective switch scheme. In 2019, we launched Raw Power, a white label energy company to bring renewable energy to the region at competitive rates. All of these schemes have served to provide residents with affordable, renewable energy, both reducing emissions and tackling fuel poverty at the same time. And of course, our award-winning Goldsmith Street social housing development has provided highly energy-efficient homes for local people. Norwich City Council has cut its own operational carbon emissions by over 60% since 2007, when we were one of the first to benchmark our carbon footprint, and we're aiming to operationally be neutral by 2030. But like all councils, we also have an important role to play in showing community leadership and driving the collaborative approach required to tackle citywide emissions. This will be put into practice with the new evidence-based independent Norwich Climate Change Commission, which is set to launch soon. We should be really proud of what this council has managed to achieve against such a challenging financial backdrop, and this is testament to the hard work and dedication of officers and colleagues. Just to quickly acknowledge that we were happy to accept the amendment proposed by the opposition to the final point of this motion, I think it was, which was the insertion of "and approve upon," so it now reads "continue to review and improve upon the progress made by Norwich City Council," because yes, of course, we're striving to improve and meet our targets. I hope that's already clear from the rest of the context of the motion, as is the idea that to give us the best chance of seeing continual and substantial improvement, we need to be properly funded and resourced by central government. So to sum up, going forward, we will continue to work innovatively and collaboratively within those constraints placed on us, but we can't continually do more with less. The government must use the opportunity of COP26 and the subsequent autumn spending review to invest in a transformative green recovery and to invest in councils. So I hope colleagues are able to lend their support to this motion tonight, and thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Stukeley to second the item. Councillor Stukeley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hampton, for introducing this motion, which lends our support to calls from around the world for genuine, effective and immediate action at COP26. Scientists have issued warnings about the impact of globalised environmental negligence for decades. Economic and political heavyweights have consistently ignored the threat in favour of short-term profits, willfully facilitating the proliferation of what has become a climate emergency. Time ran out years ago, and the financial benefits have been enjoyed by so few, while a simultaneous crisis of economic injustice and deep-rooted inequality has accompanied our descent into climate catastrophe. If we fail to finally act on climate change, it will be the poorest and most vulnerable around the world, the UK, and in this city who will suffer the most. As Councillor Hampton has explained, Tory dithering on climate change is costing precious time. And while Labour local authorities like Norwich City Council are leading on carbon reduction and green initiatives, we need resources and investment to help build on this work and bring local and national targets forward. The government must provide the means to build more energy efficient social housing, the funding for retrofitting and fully insulating the city's existing housing stock, and suitable infrastructure to develop clean public and private transport. And that's just the beginning. We need government investment in clean energy technologies, public ownership of new green industries fit for the future, creating secure, well-paid, unionised jobs for the next generation. We need to transition from a reliance on fossil fuels to a zero carbon economy without leaving a single Norwich community, family or worker behind. I hope we will all support a green industrial revolution, a system change that will deliver climate justice for our city. But it must start immediately. COP26 is more critical than ever before and offers UN members an opportunity to finally accept that truly radical measures are required now to save the planet from total disaster. As host, the UK government must take the lead and ensure real action is taken around the globe. But the Tories' record of climate inaction is shameful, and few in this meeting will really expect anything more than bumbling banalities from Boris Johnson in November. Instead, we desperately need a Labour government to push this through. We need a socialist green industrial revolution that will create climate and economic justice for Norwich, a socialist Green New Deal that this Labour-led council can deliver in the years and decades ahead. I formally second this motion as amended and urge you all to support it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stukeley. I now invite group spokespersons to speak. Councillor Galvin, would you like to speak on behalf of the Green Party?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Councillor Hampton and Stukeley, for putting this motion to Council and accepting our amendment. You have our full support, and it's really great to hear. hear what you're saying and your enthusiasm for this, because every single kilo of carbon that we can stop going up into the atmosphere counts. And we can be one of the many local authorities that are playing a really important role in the UK taking action to achieve net zero. And we all know it's absolutely essential, and sooner rather than later. So let's act. Many councils have set carbon neutral targets for sooner than 2050. It's possible, it's essential. Radical cuts need to happen by 2030. That's this decade, now, effectively. And we need, as the graph in our own environmental strategy shows, a 12.7% cut year on year in Norwich. So what about those kilos of carbon? Norwich's average per person carbon footprint is 6,785 kilos a year. The English average is 8,221. But in some parts of Norwich, like my ward and the wealthier parts of my ward, this carbon footprint exceeds 11,000 kilos. And a lot of that excess, it has to be said, is flights. So probably the most important figure of all these figures is where we need to be. And that's 2,849 kilos. That's 3 tons effectively. That's how far we have to go in the next 10 years if we're having any chance of reaching net zero by 2050. That's a quarter of what some people are now using right in the place where I'm sitting. So this change is a really massive challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's not going to be done by words. It's not going to be done by asking Alok Sharma. It's important to ask him, of course, but it's only going to be done by action. It's going to be deeds, not words that keep carbon in the ground. The council, we're in a really good position. We can lead. Residential buildings and road transport combined form nearly 60% of CO2 emissions in Norwich. So there's no doubt the challenge stretches beyond City Hall and beyond what we directly admit as a council. But as a city council, we're in a really good position. We can and we have to lead. We can convene, we can work actively with others, we can use initiatives like the Good Economy Commission and the Norwich Climate Commission to commit to a shared target before 2050. We can work with communities using all our communications channels, sharing information with citizens and setting a really positive, brave example. But action is about specifics. So I want to focus here on 3 areas and 3 specific actions we can take now as a council, and other councils have done all of them. Number 1, we need to make an action plan linked to quantified targets. We have a massive challenge on our hands. We need to get to it and get to it fast. Cutting the likes of 12.7% a year will not just happen, however good our intentions. So we need to establish a clear link between reduction targets and the scale of actual actions required to meet those targets. Secondly, we need to put our money where our mouth is and invest. We have commercial investment ability. We've spent it in the past on the airport. We must invest in large-scale renewable energy initiatives such as solar power and battery storage. There are lots of options here, from classic ones to innovative. Some councils are launching community municipal bonds so citizens can invest in safe, sustainable economy on their doorstep. Thirdly, we must, you know what's coming, retrofit. We need a retrofitting strategy, a one-stop shop, the skills, the capacity, so that each home in Norwich has the opportunity of clean energy, good insulation, and huge financial and carbon savings. And community centres, churches, all kinds of buildings can be helped. One home, one place at a time.
Can you begin to wrap up?
We can do this for Norwich, and we have to lead and act now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak on behalf of the Lib Dems?
I would. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to begin by thanking Councillors Hampton and Stootley for bringing this important motion at this time. As we know, action on tackling the climate emergency has never been more urgent, and we need joined up government at all levels to achieve our ambitious net zero targets. People all around the country know this, and that's why it's right that local councils take climate change seriously and act now. 9 in 10 councils in the country have now declared a climate emergency. They need central government to help put words into action at speed. COP26, the Global Summit on Climate Change in Glasgow this November, is the opportunity for government to show the people in the UK and the world the climate leadership needed to stop climate breakdown. Together with other Lib Dem council and group leaders, I've written to the Prime Minister calling on him to announce at COP26 that he will grant councils the powers and, importantly, resources they need to meet net zero targets and be resilient to climate impacts. The science tells us what the country has endured during the COVID-19 pandemic will pale into comparison to the economic and social impacts of climate breakdown if we do not take action immediately. The latest IPCC report told us that we have even less time left than we thought, and the independent UK climate risk assessment concluded that the UK is woefully underprepared for the impacts of climate change that will hit the country. That the gap between climate risks and preparedness has grown over the last 5 years. The UK's net zero targets can only be achieved if government and local authorities work seamlessly together. More than half of the emission cuts needed rely on people and business taking up low carbon solutions. Solutions around buildings, energy and transport, decisions that are made at a local and individual level. The National Audit Commission's July report also recognises the importance of local government to net zero, but concludes that there are serious weaknesses in central government's approach to working with local authorities on decarbonisation, stemming from the lack of clarity over local authorities' overall roles, piecemeal funding, and diffuse accountabilities. Internationally, the local governments and municipal authorities have called for COP26 to be recognised as a multi-level action COP in acknowledgement of the fact that net zero can only be achieved by national and local governments working together at all levels. The commitment to empowering local government should be reflected in the updated National Determined Contributions, NDCs, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, through a shared fiscal and policy framework between central and local government to meet net zero targets and climate adaptation priorities. We've also called on the Prime Minister to provide a global climate leadership needed to make this transformation possible for all countries by including a dedicated chapter for local government in the official agreement reached at COP26, recognising the importance of subnational actors in co-designing and delivering climate action and seeking to ensure that local government is politically and financially empowered to meet that ambition. But if our calls fail to sway the Prime Minister, there are things this Council can do without significant additional resource. We can consider how we use our land. During the summer, I listened to an interesting piece on the radio about sponge cities, essentially designing in ways to absorb excess water as part of our planning and land management policies. And we, of course, have seen the excess water in the floods in Germany at the beginning of the summer. Should we, leading by our own example, be leaving our parks and other open spaces wild meadow to help with this, rather than cover with artificial surface? Should we also, as councillors, think what our role is to help change hearts and minds when it comes from switching from the motor car, including EV for that matter, to more active travel such as cycling and walking, or improved bus and train services for those who can't be as active? Some of the comments on the local press and social media suggest that we are a long way from cycling being seen as anything other than an inconvenience to many motorists. As scenes from garage forecourts have shown over the last few days, we are still very much wedded to the car. So we're very happy to support this motion and be a part of helping to bring about the change that we need so urgently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now, are there any other councillors who wish to speak? If so, please indicate. Okay, anyone else? No. Councillor Carlo, would you please speak? Councillor Carlo?
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Thank you, Councillor Stukeley, for your motion. You rightly point out the need for government resources and powers. However, another equally important means available to the City Council is using its voice and influence and supporting development and infrastructure which doesn't lock Norwich into a high carbon future, and challenges that which does. Projects where the council could have used its voice differently include the Norwich City Deal, which is about thousands of extra housing jobs and infrastructure, in particular roads, but doesn't say a single word about climate and environmental sustainability. POSIT Hub, which has increased travel distances and carbon emissions. The NDR, the City Council's £10 million financial support for the NDR through the Community Infrastructure Levy, enable the County Council to extend the NDR from the airport to the A1067, and this has acted as a springboard for the Norwich Western Link. The Joint Core Strategy, which is predicated on the NDR, especially the North East Growth Triangle, either side of the NDR, 13,000 houses, really, which are bog standard houses and really not very impressive environmental credentials. Support via the New England Local Enterprise Board for a food hub and open countryside at Easton, entirely reliant on car and lorry access, which is being used as the county to justify the Norwich Western Link. The strategic Norfolk planning framework that the City Council has signed up to. The framework contains a very large number of road building schemes and is cited by the County Council as justification for various schemes. Then in 2015 and in 21, the City Council signed up or promoted the Norwich Air Quality Action Plan, which advocates a diesel bus fleet rather than an electric bus fleet. All of these projects built will generate substantial carbon emissions over their lifetimes, and they will outweigh the modest carbon savings from council actions. Every council decision, therefore, should be subject to carbon proofing, and those which generate emissions should be dropped. And I hope, therefore, that you will consider this proposition tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carlow. Next wishing to speak is Councillor Osborne. Councillor Osborne, please go ahead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you very much to Councillor Hampton and to Councillor Stuteley for bringing this motion. I spoke last week to Councillor Hampton about this motion and spoke about how I feel like writing another letter to government, passing another motion at the City Council. Is the government going to listen? We've done many of these versions of this motion or similar ones previously, and we're still seeing very creeping action from the government, or actually going backwards in many cases. So I think that the council, if we want to be pushing for government to provide greater funding and greater powers to local authorities, we need to be thinking about the best ways of doing that. And I think that one of the best ways of doing that is actually joining together with other local councils for example, with UK 100, which is a network of highly ambitious climate, local leaders ambitious on climate, and they're campaigning on green finance, on clean air, on decent public transport networks, and that's the kind of thing that we need to be doing now. We need to be working together with other councils. And I spoke to Councillor Hampton about this, and I hope that this is something that the council can do. I do just want to pick up briefly on the points mentioned by Councillor Stonard earlier in this meeting about Norwich Airport. Councillor Stonard said that we do not know what the future holds in sort of after the COVID pandemic. We do know what the future holds, which is climate chaos unless we can bring down emissions. And so, I think it's all very well for the council to say we need greater funding from government and more action from government, but we do also need to look at our own policies and be standing up at a local level against carbon intensive infrastructure like road building programs, like the expansion of Norwich Airport.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Is there any other member? Councillor Waters.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I've watched the apparent consensus that we should be having in this council, once again deviating the direction by the Green Group of a critique of the City Council and a rather tepid criticism of central government. We are members of UK 100. We are also members of the Key Cities Group, which itself is a group of medium-sized cities, which is making significant and innovative approaches on a whole range of issues about sustainable cities and also on the environment. And I think it needs to be acknowledged, Councillor Carlo, that we are one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And while it's fine if one is well housed and well homed, as I guess we all are, there are other people that we need to take account of in making sure that people have homes and jobs as well. That's part of being a sustainable city. I would like to see from the Green Group, who give, I have to say, the Conservative administration a pretty mild rebuke and saving all of their, let me say, animus for a Labour administration, which, as Councillors Hampton and Stuteley have very clearly and eloquently outlined as major ambitions, despite the many, many challenges that we face as a city. So occasionally, when we have motions that we can agree on, and I remember the occasion of the motion that you supported when we had our council meeting in St Andrew's Blackfriars Hall, but then we're stacking up to criticise the council and then support the motion. I understand the tactics, I understand the politics. You give little recognition to the work and the achievements of the Labour administration. It's a good job that we're speaking for them and delivering things rather than carping from the sidelines.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Price, you're next to raise your hand. Would you please go ahead?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just as a point of interest for the leader, this council is currently not on the UK 100 website. Maybe you need to take that up with them. Possibly it might be that we've not fulfilled a criteria yet. So technically that's not the case at the moment. What I would say is that it's so interesting to hear that we are being criticised for being critical. We're here and elected at the local level, and we are here to hold this administration to account. Sending letters is only, it's just pie in the sky. It's not reality. This is a climate emergency. This council is not moving far enough or fast enough, and it's absolutely legitimate for us to criticise you when we don't see the actions that Councillor Galvin has put forward. So, thank you that we can all support this motion, but can we also just see now this council really move forward? And yes, plenty of criticism for the national government, but we are not going to sit on our hands and wait for the national government to change. This council, as the lead city in the region, needs to take a lead, needs to go further and faster, and that's why we are critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Any other member wishes to speak? Okay, I can see no other member wishing to speak. So I now call upon Councillor Hampton. Councillor Hampton, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep this brief because there seems to be a good amount of consensus here on at least what is actually on paper in the motion itself. And thank you to Councillor Waters for picking up on some of those other points. So thank you to everyone for their contribution to the discussion on this tonight. It's glad to hear that we do agree on at least the big picture of this, and that's fairly refreshing, and that there's a big consensus at least on the urgency of this situation. I don't have enough time here tonight to address them all now, but I'm happy to pursue some of the specifics raised about the council's programme and actions with officers and colleagues in due course. And yes, as COP26 approaches and more opportunities to put pressure on the government come our way, we'll be taking them up whenever we're able to. This motion and the letters it resolves to write form just one strand of our response. And I think this is an important opportunity at this meeting for us to put on record our views ahead of this momentous occasion. And yeah, so to recap quickly, COP26 is our last chance, probably almost certainly, to avert this absolutely catastrophic climate change. It's time for the government to treat this like the emergency it truly is, and that means substantial public investment in a green recovery with climate justice at its heart. And importantly for us here, it does mean properly funding local governments so we can play our part to the very best of our ability. That's what this motion is about. So I hope colleagues here tonight will vote in favour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. We will now move to the vote. First of all those who are against the motion, please show. All those who wish to abstain from this motion, please now vote. All those in favour of this motion, please now vote. Thank you very much. That's a unanimous passing of this motion. We now move on to motion 7B on climate change adaptation. An amendment to motion 7B has been received from Councillor Hampton. Councillor Carlow has indicated that she's willing to accept that amendment. So if no other members object, the amendment will become part of the substantive motion. And no member has objected. So I call upon Councillor Carlow to move motion 7B as amended. Councillor Carlow.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to accept the Labour amendment as the City Council is undertaking various work strands on adapting to climate change, but I'm calling for an adaptation strategy as the various strands need pulling together. By 2050, the Met Office says that summer heat waves will be a regular event in the UK. Warmer, wetter and windier winters will mean intense downpours, flooding and hurricanes. For the people of Norwich, this will likely mean that they are at risk of river and flash flooding as well as more extreme heat. We need to prepare for an uncertain future. If not, the cost of inaction will be greater than the cost of action. We saw this with the deadly floods in Germany this summer. Our present building stock and new development are presently adding to, our existing building stock and new development are presently adding to carbon emissions, so mitigation will be paramount. But in addition to this, we will need to adapt to reduce the impact of the future climatic changes that are already locked into our future because the world, the UK, Norwich and Norfolk have not reacted quickly enough to the climate crisis. So I just want to list some proactive steps that the Council's taken on adaptation. It's got strategies for delivering services in emergencies. For example, in heat waves, contractors collecting food waste, which would putrefy in the heat, might shift to working in the evening. The Council's also produced a climate adaptation risk register, but this information isn't in the public domain. So a recommendation here is that a paper is brought to the Climate and Environment Emergencies Panel and also to the Norwich Climate Commission to clarify the different work streams on adaptation. These all need to be pulled together into a clear, holistic overview and practical steps set out for action. This could be an output of the review of services, policies and programmes, which the Council is currently undertaking through the lens of climate and environmental sustainability, with a plan going to Cabinet next spring. A vital step, as we've discussed tonight, will be a need to retrofit council and private housing stock to achieve net zero. This will need to be done in a way that ensures retrofitted houses have good airflow and ventilation throughout the hotter summers. If not, people will use air conditioning and lose the gains from retrofitting. It would be good to explore the scope for tapping into the government's new Green Finance programme to help fund large-scale retrofitting in Norwich. This should include the installation of air source heat pumps and solar panels so that buildings can generate their own energy. Another step is to ensure that street trees and grass provide shade and cooling so that people can continue to walk and cycle and not be tempted to use their cars with air conditioning. Also, the City Council needs to work with the County Council to ensure that our drainage systems are fit for purpose for increased rain during winter months. For example, flat roofs could be turned into green roofs to absorb additional rain. Similarly, the council should think where hard surfaces could be replaced with more permeable surfaces, including grass to help absorb water. We could start with the River Wensum corridor through Norwich. Riverside and recent development along King Street involve extensive hard surfacing, leaving no space for floodwater. We should view greenery as an important public benefit and demand more green space from developers. On the other hand, there will be months where East Anglia will experience water shortages. Grey water harvesting is one of the things the council needs to encourage in their own service provision for new builds through the planning process, and when looking at retrofitting their own asset stock. All of the above is achievable. Just to finish by saying that a recent edition of The New Scientist describes the day of someone living in the UK in 2050 under net zero. Apart from the torrential rain, which starts their day off, it is recognisably like today, but everything is electrified. The fictional character's home is comfortable all year round. They mostly work from home, but drive to out of town work that day in an electric car. They eat a plant-based burger for lunch. They walk through a wood, a former car park planted to accommodate winter flooding. More space has been given to green space and less to cars. This is one visualization of daily life in 2050, but only if we stay within the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlo. I call upon Councillor Osborne to second this item. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I will second this item, and I'm very pleased to do so. In August, I was very interested to read a piece by Keith Skipper, the veteran columnist on the EDP, who spoke of a grim truth about climate change. He said that Norfolk needs to acknowledge both that we cannot ignore Norfolk's role in producing climate change, but also he highlighted that we cannot ignore that it is happening to us here now. There's flooding, there's drought, and there's been disruption to food supplies all in this year, and this is going to get worse. Even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today, the climate would still continue to warm due to the time lag that is inherent in the greenhouse gas effect. So while we have to throw everything into trying to stop those greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, we also have to prepare for life in a changed climate. And just to be very clear, saying that we have to prepare for climate change adaptation is not to say that we should give up on trying to limit temperature rises, as some environmental activists would say. That would be to consign many people to many billions of people potentially to the worst effects of climate change, and that is totally immoral, and we cannot take that stance. If political leaders take bold action now, global temperature rises could still be limited. And of course, if many of the actions that are needed now to reduce emissions could also help to protect people from the effects of climate change. More local and more sustainably grown food will mean less reliance on precarious supply chains. Restoring green spaces in river catchment areas and planting trees can help to sustainably manage water and reduce both flooding and drought. Insulating homes and making them more energy efficient can protect people from extreme heat at the same time as lifting them out of fuel poverty. So that's why we're proposing this motion really to the City Council. And of course, there's some things that are directly within the Council's control that can be started now. And we've talked earlier about retrofitting housing, and that needs to be done as a priority. Equally, looking at how the council uses green space, and I'd echo some of Councillor Wright's earlier statements on that. But of course, a climate adaptation strategy must be for the whole city, not just for the city council. And so we need to look at planning policies. We need to look at working with partners, with businesses and educational institutions, with health officials, and with government itself, with government in Westminster. Finally, I would say that adaptation is not just about trying to minimize the costs of disaster when it strikes. There's hard measures to prevent flooding, such as flood barriers or stockpiles of food in case of emergencies, and those are important. But adaptation is also about social interactions. Communities fare better in natural disasters when there are social links between neighbours, enabling people to find shared ways of doing things and build those links, such as by growing food in their estate.
Councillor Osborne, can you begin to
I will.
wind up,
Closing
please?
their street to cars so that kids can play, as we saw recently in Norwich, and Car Free Day are a good way to encourage those social links. Equally, tackling inequality has to be at the front and centre of a climate adaptation strategy, and I hope that that's what this council will do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Osborne. I now call upon group spokespersons. Councillor Hampton, would you like to reply on behalf of the Labour Party?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Carlow and Osborne for bringing this motion today. The findings of a most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report published in August are indeed stark, as I think the motion noted. That report highlighted that the warming we've experienced to date has already put in motion some irreversible changes, leaving us with no choice but to adapt and mitigate in order to protect our communities and habitats. This obviously has to take place alongside and not instead of strong and sustained reduction of carbon emissions. And we've already talked tonight about the transformative change required for this to happen. And to say it once again, this is a climate justice issue. It's the poorest and most vulnerable in our society, in Norwich, nationally and internationally, who will be and are already being hit the hardest by the effects of climate change. Adaptation is a necessity to mitigate the worst effects of this breakdown, but adaptation measures can and should be implemented to provide benefit to our communities too, so this should be seen as an opportunity as well. And some of these opportunities could include enhancing biodiversity, increasing access to open spaces, and overall improved health outcomes for our residents. I'd also like to thank Councillor Carlow for accepting our brief couple of amendments to this motion, which we put forward to try and reflect that the Council has already been carrying out climate adaptation work and this is ongoing. Thanks, Councillor Carlow, for highlighting some of this. And again, I'm happy to follow up some of the more specifics of what we could be doing with officers following this meeting. Adaptation to climate change used to be a national indicator, NI 188, up until these were abolished by the Department of Communities and Local Government, as it was then, and very arguably should still be now. Norwich City Council was progressing through the levels of this indicator before it was axed. But even now, we remain mindful of the value of these indicators, so have continued to keep our climate adaptation programmes active and updated. We've continued to use UK SIP, UK Climate Impact Programme, data from the Met Office to refresh our adaptation planning tools. And as members will know, it's a similar story with indicators like the NI 185 carbon reduction indicator, also scrapped, but we've continued to monitor and report on our emissions despite that obligation having been removed. We'll continue to do our adaptation work and to share with partners when and where there is interest. So thank you again for opening discussion on this really important issue tonight. I'm happy to support this motion and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Councillor Lubbock, would you like to reply on behalf of the Lib Dems?
Oh gosh. Yes. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Carlow and Councillor Osborne for bringing this motion. When I was first elected a councillor in 1995, the debate around climate change was, is it really happening? Skeptics, scientists, oil companies, and those with vested interests presented contradictory evidence, consistently denying that climate change was actually happening. Now, 26 years later, that debate has been lost by the climate change deniers, who have now switched the debate to, there is nothing we can do to stop climate change. The situation is hopeless, so carry on as normal. I very much see the role of all levels of government and society now that they have to say that although climate change is happening and it can feel overwhelming and too big an issue to tackle, that it is not too late to make a difference and to prevent the worst effects of climate change, and that there is hope. We are at a critical time and must work to limit the worst effects of climate change by adapting and transitioning to a green future. As the motion says, as a council, we need to continue to develop a climate change adaptation strategy for all our services. But crucially, we need to share that with those we represent, our residents, who need to see that just as the council are making changes, then they too can make changes, taking those essential steps to mitigate and adapt to climate change. We cannot dictate what our residents should be doing. We can only tell stories of what others are doing. These how they need to.
Councillor Lubbock, you seem to be freezing.
Examples from simply catch water in butts around the house to encouraging the eating of less waste. Perhaps
sorry, Councillor Lubbock, you seem to be freezing sometimes. I wonder if while you're speaking, you wouldn't mind if you turn your video off, it might improve. And perhaps if you go back about 30 seconds before we start to get those problems. Sorry about this.
Right. Stop video. Right. Let's try that. Thank you for that. I was saying that we cannot dictate what our residents should be doing. We can only tell stories of what others are doing, what is possible. And apart from the how, they need to know why they need to do it. Showcasing examples from simply catching rainwater in butts around the house to encouraging the eating of less meat, walking to school, reducing food waste. I'm suggesting a new page on the website entitled Have You Tried? And asking residents to submit their experiences of adapting their lifestyle to give them a sense of doing their bit. Everyone in Norwich should know what is at stake and what is being asked of them in the run-up to the COP26. It is our job to communicate that message in a clear, upbeat and helpful way with lots of examples told through stories from ordinary people, or perhaps should be told through stories of extraordinary people, and helping others to follow their example. In the words of the pressure group 38 Degrees, as the host nation of COP26, we have an incredible opportunity to make it a success, but only if Boris Johnson and Chancellor Rishi Sunak seriously step up their game over the next 40 days to ensure global leaders commit to doing what needs to be done. Boris to show international leadership, and Rishi investment in a green future. However, regardless of the government's commitment to step up to a greener future, we all need to make an individual commitment to make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lubbock. And you were able to be heard clearly.
Good.
So thank you very much. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on this item? No, there are no other members who wish to speak on this item. So I'd like to go back to Councillor Carlow. Councillor Carlow, would you like to respond?
I'd like to thank colleagues for the really important contributions they've made tonight, and to the Council for accepting the motion on the need for an adaptation strategy. It feels like an extraordinary moment in the history of humanity. We've never stood on such a cliff edge before, looking into the abyss. And people are coming together around the world to recognise the need to act, but we need to act so quickly because we've left things. We've just dragged our feet over the last 30 years. So I'd just like to add that the Greens, in responding to Councillor Walter's earlier point tonight, that the Greens, of course, do support the need for new homes. We recognise the need for new homes, but they must be built to the highest environmental standards. If not, they require expensive retrofitting later on. And this is really what's been happening in Norwich. Thousands of new homes are being built, but not to the highest environmental standards. The Greens support the need for meaningful work for everyone, but the jobs created must be those in the green economy. Otherwise, we'll always be running to catch up on carbon emissions. We also need transport infrastructure, but we need sustainable infrastructure. We don't need building more roads, just locks us further into climate crisis. So just wanted to make those important points. And to thank everyone and let's go forward and let's hope that lots of positive actions will come out of COP26. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlo. So we will now move to the vote. All those who are against this motion, please indicate. Nobody's objecting to this. Are there any abstentions on this motion? There are no abstentions on this motion. All those who are in favour of this motion, please indicate. So that is another unanimous motion. So thank you very much for that. 2 hours have passed. And I will ask you all if the remaining items can be taken as unopposed business. Let me just put that question to you. Does anyone opposing taking the other items as unopposed business? Okay, everyone is happy for that to happen, and therefore I consider those items to be taken unopposed. And that's it. Yes. I wish you all a good night. And if you've been watching the council meet, I hope you've enjoyed the process. Thank you all so much. Good night.